Welcome to Adaptive Cards and Microsoft Teams today, which is our monthly community call. We have Ojasvi Choudhary from Teams platform, Matt Heidinger from the Adaptive Cards group, and Gabo Gilabert on the bot framework to talk about various aspects of this. So I will let Ojasvi go ahead and get started.
As Dana mentioned, today we're going to talk about adaptive cards in Microsoft Teams. And I'm Ojasvi. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Teams platform. And with me, I've got Matt from the Adaptive Cards team and Gabo from the Bot Framework team. So I'm hoping, like, between the three of us, we've got you covered when it comes to bots and cards. And, we'll have some time for your questions towards the end if you've got any questions related towards Adaptive Cards and Bot Framework within Teams. With that, Matt and Gabo, would you like to introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Matt Heidinger. I work on Adaptive Cards, and I'll just be giving a quick intro through this and have a link to, if you would like to learn more about Adaptive Cards, we do a monthly Adaptive Cards community call as well. So we'll be kind of surface level, at least from my perspective on this one, and if you want a deep dive, we'll provide you a way to do that.
I'm Gabo Gilabert. I'm a software delivery engineer in the bot framework team and based in New York City, and I'm going to be showing how to use adaptive cards and templates with a simple bot that I wrote.
Okay. So let me just walk you real quick through the agenda today. I'll start by providing an overview of what's new with cards and Teams right now. We've got a lot of exciting features that we've GA'd over the past few months, and some that are about to be GA'd within the next 2-3 weeks or so, and I'd like to share them with you. Then we'll do a demo of adaptive cards with incoming webhooks. I know a lot of you have been looking forward to this. This is probably one of our top most rated requests on Teams user voice, so we'll show a little bit of that. And then we've got templating, which is another really exciting feature coming in from the Adaptive Cards team. So we'll have like Matt and Gabo talk to us about that. Lastly, I'll have you, I want to briefly also touch upon the feature roadmap and the upcoming feature support that we have. Just sort of like get your feedback and bearing on where we're heading, and like just trying to give you a sneak peek of the things to come. And lastly, questions and feedback. So, we've got the three of us over here. Hopefully we can help you out if there's any questions that you have with regards to development, or if there's any feedback that you've got, we're more than happy to take it. So let's get started. For those of you who are aware of adaptive cards, right, they are a very powerful, they're an open card exchange format that is very powerful in the sense that you develop once, and you have the same card that is extensible in Microsoft Teams. Same card works within Outlook, and within Teams, you have it working across all three of our clients, whether it's desktop, iOS, and mobile. So from our perspective, we are like, within the Microsoft Teams perspective, we're all in on adaptive cards, and we're gonna keep on investing more and more over here. So what have we, so this is just a few things that we've had over the past 2-3 months. Firstly, we've got Adaptive Cards 1.2 GA support in Teams, finally. The second thing we've got is we've got add mention support inside cards. So if you have been developing bots inside Teams, you always have the ability to add mention a user inside a message, and that would show up within the activity feed. You can do this. You can do the same within a cards over here. So you can see this card for John Doe. This red is the person's name, and if you would actually, if this was Teams and you would hover your mouse over it, the people card would show up, and this entire card and the corresponding message would be available in their activity feed. So it's another way of generating a notification if you want to provide specific focus onto this card. And and we've also, and for my third bullet point, like, we've also been heavily invested in ensuring that adaptive cards work seamlessly across both desktop and mobile clients. So that's GA for the last 2-3 months. In dev preview right now, we have support for adaptive cards with incoming webhooks. So you can actually try this right now. You can, if you would like to set up an incoming webhook within Microsoft Teams, you can actually post adaptive cards to that incoming webhook today, and I'll give you like a little demo of this. But you feel free to try it yourself too, because this works. So mention support within adaptive cards. So over here, got an Azure Pipelines card, and the scenario that we think that mention support really makes a lot of sense is where you've got like a person on DRI, or you've got a DevOps type scenario. I mean, you can really use it anywhere, but just from a scenario perspective. And you really want to call out 2 or 3 people who are associated with a card or a particular incident or a particular action. So instead of having in the earlier flow, you would have had to mention them outside the card from your bot within the body of the message somewhere else. But in the new flow, you can have them mentioned within the card itself. Do use it judiciously, because anytime you mention a user from the card's perspective, it is going to show up in the activity feed over here. So it does drive that notification. It's great for visibility. It's great for engagement of your app if you want to like engage users and let them know of actions or content from your app's perspective that is especially relevant to them. This is the right way to do it. But again, you want to be mindful and like not overdo it, because it could feel spammy. Given that this is really powerful. So here's the simple schema, the simple JSON schema that goes with mentioning a user inside the card. In the blog post that Dana sends out, I will link this documentation. I will link this documentation so you can reference it over there. But basically, so what you need to do is you need to have a type which is mentioned, and then you need to have a text associated with, and you need some sort of text associated with it. And then you need the ID. So this is the 29 ID, the Teams user ID that you're familiar with from the bot development side. So rich text blocks. So this is something that Adaptive Cards has supported for a very long time, and for a while now, and we've brought this into Teams. And the way I thought about it, I was talking to Matt about like how to position the slide, and I think he said something that made a lot of sense. Is like, with Adaptive Cards, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, or something like that. But I think what he was trying to say was that you've got all of these little features such as italic support, bolds, being able to bold text, being able to provide color to text, and adding images within cards that really allows you to create these rich cards and Teams. Over here, we've got an example of MSD in the magazine, and the point that I want to drive with you is that as you think about bringing cards and Teams, think about branding and really differentiating your app. Like with all of this rich text support and imaging support and font support and color support, you could really make your card stand out and customize it to your app's needs. And if there's more relevant customization support, or like more theming support that you're interested in, I think that's something that both Matt and I would be interested in hearing about, and we can take that towards the end. Toggle visibility. So here's another one that we think there's another particular scenario that we think makes a lot of sense within Teams. A lot of times, what we've seen is like cards are getting bulky, and there's more and more content within them. So especially if you are within the context of a channel, you want to keep your card compact and well spaced, so it's not too jarring from the user's perspective. So for something like that, I think we have show cards available in Teams as part of Adaptive Cards 1.2, where you can click on the See More option, and then the card expands and gives you the full view. So it's going to take up the entire breadth of the channel. And within this toggle visibility support, you really want to use it to keep your card nice and compact. Adaptive Cards plus incoming webhooks. So yes, we've heard you. I think this has been by far one of the most requested feature requests that we've had on Teams user voice. People are like, hey, we need Adaptive Cards plus incoming webhooks. Message card support is not flexible enough. And yes, this has been on the backlog for a while now, and currently it is right now supported in dev preview. The blog post from our side announcing this will go out shortly, but you can try this right now. So let me just walk you through a quick demo. So over here, I am within my Microsoft Teams demo tenant, and I've got an incoming webhook for incidents set up over here. And within Postman, I've got like a few adaptive card samples that I've taken beforehand. So these are the standard samples that I've taken from the adaptive cards website. Just open them. Yeah, so I've taken the flight itinerary and the food order samples over here. And I'm gonna try, and I will just post a few of these cards over here. So earlier, let's go ahead and send it. So earlier, you were just limited to the traditional message card support in Teams. So this is the same sample from the message card side, and you could do a few functions with that. You can add a comment, you could close it, you could view this in GitHub. The same workflow you could accomplish with adaptive cards. So instead of actually using this incoming webhook, let me just go ahead and set up a new one just to take you through the entire flow. So we are going to select incoming webhooks. Great. Copy. And you can customize your own webhook with your icon and as well if you'd like to do that. Okay, so we've got this new adaptive cards webhook set up in this channel. Let's head back over into Postman and send an adaptive. And send this adaptive card over there. This is a custom adaptive card that I made that basically is for incident management. Yeah, and it shows up over here. So within this, you've got an incident management type of scenario where you want to notify people what's happening, how many people are impacted. You can have links that go out. This is a dummy link; it doesn't actually go anywhere. But you can have the support with adaptive cards inside incoming webhooks right now. Let's try a few more. Let's try a few more of these. So we've got the flight itinerary and the food order. So yeah, what we went through. So yeah, this is the same sample for an adaptive card. The flight itinerary sample, I just pulled it off the website, and it's working within an incoming webhook. Over here, we've got the food order sample, and you can see that over here, this is an example of a show card. So if I click between steak versus chicken versus tofu, the card expands and then it goes back to normal. So this is actually another good example of compact card design, because this would be too much information to the user in the first go. So you want to start with something that's a little more compact and then work your way through the flow. Okay, heading back to the presentation. So what is in dev preview today and what's supported? So all native adaptive card schema elements except actions will work. Within action support, we will support action.openURL, action.showCard, and action.toggle visibility. And as I mentioned, we'll share this as part of this community calls blog post, but we will be sending another few blog posts within a few weeks that details all of this and what's supported and the documentation and how to enable it. In terms of future support, what we're really looking to do is in Q3 or in H2 this year, we want to bring in action submit support as well as the ability to add mention users. The ability to add mention users is also, I think, the top modded item within a Teams user voice. So we are, it is on the backlog and we are working on it. I can't commit to a timeline for this, but it's something that we are investigating. But if you're really, really inclined towards supporting users within Microsoft Teams for your app somehow, I would highly encourage you to develop a bot. because all of this support and a lot more is already available there. And if some of you have feedback that, hey, developing a bot is really too much, I really want to support with an adaptive card, I would love to hear that. So in this call today, or maybe you can reach out to us via Twitter with the account that Dina's going to share, and I'll also share the email address for the internal Microsoft Teams dev alias that we personally monitor, or I personally monitor. So any of those, and we will also have a survey option for you. So if you would like to give us feedback via survey, but so you're welcome to reach out to us for any of these options, like the survey, the chat, directly in the call, or later via email. But do let me know, because we're thinking of how we want to support both action.submit as well as the ability to add mentioned users within incoming webhooks, and we really want to understand how you think of using an incoming webhook for Microsoft Teams development versus using a bot, and what is the what's the gap, and what's your thought process there. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt and Gabo for adaptive cards templating. So, Matt, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about templating, and then we can hand it over to Gabo?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as this video goes live, I'll make sure to tweet it, because the incoming webhook stuff comes up all the time from the adaptive cards community. That's really cool. The webhooks announcement is pretty awesome. So, hi everyone, again, I'm Matt. I work on adaptive cards, and I'm only going to talk to you for a few minutes today just to set the stage to see something cool and how this is used in practice. Here's a quick lap around adaptive card templating. So when you build an adaptive card today, the content, as in the name Microsoft, the price here, all these values are within the card itself. And that makes it really hard to now reuse this payload, because some of this content will always stay the same. This will always be a text block. This will be a column set. It'll always be extra large. But some of the content, like the text and these things, you want to be dynamically replaceable. And that's where a template comes in. So if I change this and show you what it would look like as a template, all those dynamically replaceable areas, for example, Microsoft, the symbol, the quote price, what was the open, high, low, you replace these with what are known as binding expressions. And they're highlighted in yellow there, but it's just a dollar curly brace, and that says, hey, then what do you want to bind this to? In this case, the name. And then you send the data, the dynamically replaceable stuff, as a separate payload. And with those two combined, you now get that original card that you had from the beginning. And there it is. So the one thing I'll mention that is pretty powerful, and if you've been following along with templating, we had some good updates a couple weeks ago at Build. So when you're writing a template, if you have the ability to change the data, you can make some pretty good stuff, but sometimes you don't have the ability to change the shape of the data. For example, maybe you're calling an external web service, or it's another part of your organization that is just a little harder to change the data. So sometimes you want the template to be able to shape the data and do more powerful things. For example, if conditions here. So if the price is up, I want to show an up arrow, or if it's down, I want a down arrow. And sometimes I want to format this value with 2 decimal places. Typically, humans read currency with 2 decimals. So this is massaging that decimal into some human readable, presentable thing. And that you can do at the templating layer with what we're calling adaptive expressions. And these will be standalone expressions that can be used inside of a template. And for all intents and purposes, it lets you build some pretty powerful cards. Adaptive expressions is a collaborative effort with the Bot Framework folks. And it's got hundreds, I believe, of just built-in functions, from formatting to parsing JSON to looping over data and all sorts of these powerful things. So you can actually write some pretty powerful stuff. So the last thing I'll show to get started, and Ojasvi showed you adaptivecards.io. This is where everything adaptive cards lives. And if you're familiar with adaptive cards. If you're not, the place I always like people to go to is the samples page. And once you're in samples, these are just some example adaptive cards. You can build a lot more. They're, again, just an example. But what you can do is turn on this checkbox, use adaptive card templating, and instead of a single payload, you'll get two. So there's the data JSON, and there's the template down here, and I can click Try It Yourself. That loads up the adaptive card designer. If I click preview mode, it's going to show what that template looks like with this sample data. This just makes designing a card easy. And so, I can change this to, Tesla or whatever, and you'll see the card will update accordingly. So that's a lap around adaptive card templating. I'm sorry, that was the wrong one, but you get the idea, I think. And that's really it. So templating is in release candidate. We've been excited to release this, and it will be available to use in GA in the next coming weeks. It's available for .NET and JavaScript. And with that, I'll hand it over to Gabo, who used this in practice to build something pretty neat. I actually found this at a hackathon, so I was like, man, you got to show this to the community call folks.
First, I'm going to show you what we did in the bot framework. I work in the SDK team for bot framework, right? And every once in a while, we have these internal hackathons where we try out new things. So this is a bot that I actually built as a test for testing our capabilities in Teams. It's all open source in case you want to play with the code later on. Let me show you first what the bot does, and then I'm just going to go behind the scenes and show you how adaptive cards and templates are being used, right? So this bot is a bot a program manager came up with the idea of a write that down bot, right? So we wanted to integrate that with Teams, right? And here I'm looking at this meeting, right? And let's say I see a question here that I need to follow up later on, right? So we are implementing a messaging extension here, so I can just select that guy and say add to my notes. So what the bot is actually doing here, right, is going to bot framework, returning an adaptive card, and I'm using that adaptive card to render this form that the user is actually going to be filling up, right? So I'm just going to say action 1. I can choose private share, right, and here it captures the original message and it saves that into my private notes, right? Later on, I can go and talk to my bot privately, right, and I can say, show my notes, right? And the bot is going to respond. And then if I scroll up, I think I should have the action 1 here, right? And I get a link to the original message, right? And takes me to the message in context in the original place where the conversation happened. So what I'm doing here is I'm combining two different paradigms, right? So basically, I have an adaptive card that allows me to enter the data. If you were doing this as a conventional bot, you would say, I want to take a note, and what's the title of the note, and what's the body of the note, and then you would have a back and forth. You can see here, I'm in the middle of a meeting. I'm not disrupting the flow. I'm using a messaging extension to pop up a note, take a note to self, right, and just have that in my private storage. Right now, the storage is fake because this is just a hack project. And then I can use the conversational AI to talk privately one-on-one with the bot and say, hey, show me my cards. And this is actually rendering a list of all the notes I captured. There's a lot of crazy test data there, but basically it allows me to do that in context. I can even go further, right? I can go to talk to Matt and say, hey, someone asked a question here. So I can use the messaging extension and search for an action that I have captured here, click on it, right, and then send Matt a link to that action, right, and Matt gets that, and he can also go click on the adaptive card and go to the conversation right in context and see exactly what happened there, and he can act on it, right? So that's pretty much basically the idea or the general flow of this, right? Any questions so far? I mean, feel free to interrupt, or I'm not checking the chat window except for this, but let me know, Matt or Dana, just jump in if anything comes up there. So let me show you how this was done, right? So I have a bot written. Yeah, I think Power Apps, you can do integration with Power Apps too, but I just used Bot Framework here on the adaptive cards for this. So let me show you exactly what this bot is doing, right, and how the things look like in code. First of all, as Matt was showing earlier, right, so I have the designer for cards. I go to the designer window. This is the new card template, right? So when I create a new card, I have the test bot, the title. I can bind to specific fields like title, node body, private or shared, right? And I have the design of my card. And I also have the data model for the card. And this is super useful because basically sometimes you would have me as a developer, right? I do care about the data that I'm going to be persistent. So I have the JSON schema of the data I'm going to capture. Then I can work with someone in UX that actually defines what the card is going to look like, right? And for example, if I were the card that I show when I said like, show me my items or show me my notes, right? This is the card. And here's the data, which is actually a collection of fake notes, but I can go in preview mode, right? And you see that it's actually rendering the card. It's actually rendering a collection of that card, right? So I have a single card, I have a data bound to an array, and I share that. And I have, like Matt was showing earlier, right? I can even, let me just go back to preview mode. So if it's a share node, I want one icon. If it's a private node, I want a different icon. So I have all this conditional logic. So as a developer, I don't need to go and write a lot of iffy code in there because the person that is in charge of the UX or handling the look and feel of my card, right, is actually going to take care of that. Then I can data bind these to my nodes. So this actually, I'm scoping that to a collection. So this is an array containing nodes, right? And then within each node, I just repeat the text block for the images of what I want to show there. Basically, also, I can turn on visibility, right? So you see some nodes have link to messages. Some nodes don't have link to messages. So I can hide and show elements here using some conditional logic in the iteration, right? So this is super cool because if I show you how would I have done this with code, let me show you this a little bit. And so, for example, if I would have had to render a list of nodes using the adaptive card language model, right, object model, basically what I would need to do is like first hydrate an adaptive card, which I can actually instantiate that from JSON. But then when I want to display the nodes, what I'm going to have to do is find an element called nodes into that card, then create the image element, then create a column, then add the image, then the title, then decide if I'm going to show the message link URL. So all this code, right, that I had to write before in C# and using the object model, right, gets simplified by just simply, let me show you the easy way of doing this, right? So I have the template of the data. So I do grab that adaptive card template here, and I embed that as an embedded resource in my solution. Then I load that template. Then I have a list of nodes object, right, that I just serialize that as JSON. And then I simply do card template expand nodes. And that's just going to hydrate the adaptive card and just boom. It's going to render on the screen that list. And as a developer, I just need to write this. And if someone else changes their mind later on and they want to change the look and feel of the adaptive card or do something different, they just need to work on the designer, send me the new JSON. I can just put that as a resource in my app and boom, everything is working. And I don't need to touch this logic anymore. And I don't need to deal with columns, containers, all this craziness and find elements by ID and things like that. So, which I think is pretty cool. By the same way, if you see an example of how would I render the initial nodes, right? So remember when I right click and say capture a node, basically same thing, right? So I have a node template. That is the one I showed you in the designer earlier on. I can data bind that to a node instance. I can initialize that node instance and just create that. And when the user clicks on submit, right? So when they submit the card, what I just need to do is like take that data payload that comes back from the adaptive card. I can map that to my node JSON object. I grab that and I put into my storage. So the coding becomes way simpler, right? And I can write better bots, right? So that's it. Any questions or any comments?
I mean, that's really powerful, right? Like you literally went from like hundreds of lines of codes to like one function by the end of this. It's just, that's amazing.
And the biggest thing on that, I wrote that object model SDK. That was one of my first kind of contributions when we were just seeing if this adaptive card stuff even makes sense. So that was like some of the first code that we ever wrote. And, you can write it and it's a little bit clunky and a little cumbersome. But the major problem then is now it's in code. It can never go back into the designer. You can never really see what this looks like. And it's a really poor, you revisit this code 6 months from now and you can't really remember what the card looked like. It's kind of a bummer from an inner dev loop experience. Yeah. So I really like that. And the other thing I'll just mention, because I don't know if it's super obvious, is you can use templating today. You can use it in a Teams bot. You can use it like templating happens server side. So the template gets bound to the data and then a fully hydrated, if you will, adaptive card gets sent to Teams. Teams has no idea you use templating. Templating was just a developer feature. So you can get started with it today. And in fact, that's what Gabo did and released this.
Hey, a couple questions on that. Alexander asked if for the preview of adaptive cards in Teams, is it necessary to use a hero card and not the adaptive, or is that still the case, or will that change?
So, yeah, I think I couldn't get, that's something I need to get back to you on that. I couldn't get the adaptive card to render. That's why in my sample, I'm just sending the card directly. I think it should be possible, but I have something wrong in
Are you talking about in the messaging extension?
Yeah, no, well, so ideally, I think if I understand the question, is like when I'm in the message here, right? So if I want to render a card in this section and preview it before I send it back at you, right? I mean, if that's actually an adaptive card, so far I'm using a hero card for that, but I'm not sure if that's possible. So if I select an action here, right, and that goes out, doesn't work on Teams because it's not, my bot is private and it's not added here, but it doesn't render in the text message. But I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah, my somewhat limited understanding of it is that should be a full adaptive card in the input box, but in the search list when you're searching for them, I think those have to be thumbnail cards.
Yeah.
I think that's, And that's just when you're like doing a quick search in a messaging extension.
Okay, and then Chris asked, can you use templating as a card library for a bot and only send the schema down once?
Not yet. So I believe the question is something I'll say is someone wrote a really cool DevOps bot, a team, a company out there. And they have DevOps integrated into Teams where you can track all of your builds in a channel. And builds can be pretty complicated, multi-steps, they can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 20 minutes to run. Anyway, it's a pretty complicated, set of build steps. And they have to send a full adaptive card. And as it redraws in Teams, it kind of refreshes and flickers. And what they want to do is just send the data. Just send the data, have Teams do the data binding. You don't have to send the full adaptive card. That doesn't exist yet today, but that is where we see this going. As templating gets integrated more into the adaptive card layer, into the rendering layer, you can certainly see a world where you're just sending data. You have a remote reference to a template somewhere over URL or whatever. Today that doesn't exist, but that is where we want to get to. And if that didn't answer your question, please just kind of follow it up.
Okay, I'm sort of going back. We posted the link about community calls. There is an Adaptive Cards community call that you can download the calendar series for as well. It goes deeper into the adaptive cards. Matt asked, how can I use templating with something like Flowbot that just takes regular JSON for cards?
Yeah, so Flowbot, it doesn't support adaptive card templating as of now. Power Automate in general and Flow has a pretty rich JSON syntax. You can do a lot of really neat things. So you can create the similar thing, but you can't use an adaptive card template as of today. We are working with them. If you turn on experimental features in your tenant, if you have access to that, I think it has to be installed in your tenant, and then you can turn on experimental features. On some of the connectors, such as the Teams one, the adaptive card designer is integrated, and you can put in dynamically replaceable tokens there. And that makes it pretty easy to create an adaptive card, send it to Teams without having to, rebuild the card. A lot of this stuff, like I said, it's experimental, and we're trying to figure out what's the right integration there. So we don't have anything to share just yet, but we are working closely with that team because they fit together so well. We just have to figure out the right way to support the adaptive card syntax, the Power Automate syntax, and just kind of make them work without it feeling like this is super strange.
Okay. And Donovan asked, can you use adaptive cards on a SharePoint page?
Yeah, so we sent a link to the web parts that we just showed last week at the adaptive card community call. Hugo Bernier works on the PNP team over there. And I sent a link to that file, but also I don't know if the community call is up online just yet. It might be. But you could watch the adaptive cards community call where he goes through all that and how to get it and next steps and things like that. So that's
that is going up today
cool.
on our YouTube channel, and then we'll also have Hugo's separate demo outside. We'll have the full hour call. And then we'll have the specific demo of Hugo's as well posted on our YouTube channel.
Cool.
Yeah. Lou made a comment that going back to the webhooks, the only thing that would be nice at this point is an alternate to using HMAC on outgoing webhooks, and that would really round out the webhook ability. Depending on where you host your endpoint, validating that isn't always simple to do. Don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we will we'll think through that one. I think it's just this, and just auth in general is something that we kind of need to figure out with regards to incoming and outgoing webhooks, because if you're sending data out of Teams, we will have like some sort of guardrails again, so we really want to think through that. Okay, but yeah, I'll keep that in mind. That's a good one. We'll keep that in mind as we work through this. And we have your email, so I'll reach out to you.
Yeah. And I also just posted a link to a survey. If you guys wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to complete that, that would be awesome. It's on bots, connectors, and cards. And I think there's a second one that I need to post too. So let me go ahead and do that.
Yes, please post both of them. I think there was another question, and Matt, maybe this one's more for you than for me. It's like, also, is toggle visibility only available as an action, or is it possible to toggle visibility based on value in another input? The reason I ask is that this would eat up one of the 6 possible actions on a card.
So action toggle. So you do have the ability to do what's known as select actions, and that's making any element clickable. So you can have an image that's clickable. You can have a column that's clickable. So if you don't want them, it's tricky to discover. So there's other problems you may run into there, despite the limitation on the number of actions you can put. You can't do anything today based on the input value or any kind of client-side state. Templating is all server-side. Once we do get this template language integrated into the client-side layer, you can imagine a whole host of things, such as even like cascading drop-downs. So based on the value of this input, I want to do other things. And you saw some of the advanced expressions you can put in the templates. But again, right now they all happen on the server. You can certainly imagine a world where those expressions can react to other inputs or other elements on the card, the state of the card itself, and you can really build some much more expressive UI. But that's just not available today. So toggle visibility is your only option, and it's in Teams. I do believe, it's limited to 6 actions. That said, too, I guess there's always the action set. So not everyone discovers that. I know some Teams developers use that. So you have the actions bar at the bottom of the card, and that one is limited to a certain number just for UX reasons. But there is an action set element that you can put in the body of the card, and you can kind of create different layouts there. So you can put more actions in the card, and one of those could be a toggle visibility.
And I guess we could probably explore limiting. We can probably revisit that number for 6 again. It was mainly, I think the intent was just not to overwhelm the user, but like for certain types of action support, action dot toggle visibility should probably count against that. Maybe it's like more against action dot submit that we could rethink that.
Yeah, sure.
Jumping back in real quick. So I think this is just underscoring the point that I was trying to make to you earlier in the call today. We've got lots of exciting feature support coming up for H2. This isn't officially on the books, but like this is something that's high in the priority, and that we're considering. We've got support for input validation. So and some of these they're available on the adaptivecards.io website over there, so you can like go. I think for input validation, I believe, Matt, the specs are visible. So is that correct?
Yeah. So input validation is coming. We'll have it released in the SDKs in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But this adds a rich set of input validation client side, so you can make sure inputs are set a certain way before submitting.
And then built on top of that, after that we'll consume it within Teams. We've got search controls. So if you've got inputs, how do you search within them? The third one is this is more team specific. Right now, if you have an adaptive card within a channel, let's say, let me. So this adaptive card, can everyone see my browser?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this card is basically taking I would say anywhere from 50 to 55% of the screen. So that's why you really get stopped for space. Now you can actually expand it to the full width of the channel message. So take up the full 100% of the space, and gives you more real estate and gives you more space to work with. So that's also something that we're exploring in H2, just from more aesthetics and from a design perspective, gives you more room to play around with. Then we've got information masking. So if there's some sensitive information inside an adaptive card, you can work around it. We're also looking at providing role-based views. So this is another scenario that we're really excited about, where you have the ability to show where different people can look at the same card and view it differently. So think about it as a polling scenario where the poll creator versus the poll viewer might have a different set of actions on the same card. So another really powerful scenario that we hope to release sometime later in the year. Then, as I told, actions.submit with incoming webhooks. We've got refresh buttons within cards. So Matt, I think, in his in the templating exercise, showed you that card of stock picker. So typically, what happens is if you have a card that contains data from a particular dashboard, or you have a stock price within a channel, over time that information is going to get stale. So instead of the user having to recreate a card and having to have them go through the entire flow all over again, especially if they're within the context of the same conversation, it makes a lot of sense to just update that card dynamically. So we're going to provide some sort of a button for the user to click on, and then the content gets updated dynamically. And we've got more these small little tweaks that are going to make cards as a whole really powerful. And inside Teams, we will provide support for people icons. So if you want to call out individual users per se and have their cards associated with them, have their images associated with them. We will have file chiclets. So, for example, if you got like a Word file and you want to somehow associate that with the adaptive card itself, you can do that. You can so I spoke about mentions. So mention support right now is limited to an individual user. But if you're familiar with Teams, we've also got this concept of tags, which is a collection of users. So we're also exploring bringing all of that in. And there are many more features that I just didn't have the time to list it all out over here. But the intent being that there's a lot of interesting innovation down the pipeline, and we'll keep you updated as these things come through. And with that, I think that's it. That's all I had. So if you have any more questions, any more feedback for us, I'm more than happy to take it. And Dana has those 2 survey links for you. So please do fill that out. I regularly look at that and monitor feedback and use that as a gauging point for where to take the roadmap forward.
There is another question. For variable width, would that be for channels only or for also one-on-one bot conversations?
Both. That's a good question. Yeah, it'll be for both.
And Chris did have another comment. Search controls and input validations would be awesome, assuming search will be able to go against the external API and not have to send all possible options with the card.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think eventually we do want it to be dynamic. So if you head back over, so I've been asking Matt for this. So just go ahead and upvote this item over here for search, and that's how we get it. Matt's on the call, so eventually, if all of us upvote enough, we will have it done. But we will phase it out. The current thinking is to provide it in 2 steps. First one being to have it static on some sort of existing data, but eventually it's going to be something that there's an API and then you provide all the fields associated with that form. So that's a good question.
Anything else? Just as a reminder, we have been silent on social, and so we'll be resuming our announcements, reminders about different events and all of that on the 18th, which is on Thursday. So we are still posting blogs and we are still posting recordings to our YouTube channel. We're just not doing social right now on Twitter. We will put links and information and anything we did not answer into the blog post, which we will post within 48 hours, along with the recording of this presentation as well.
I noticed a question earlier on what resources we have for learning. So over here we've got the Teams documentation, aka.ms Teams Step Doc. We've got GitHub samples on specifically for developing bots. You have the adaptivecards.io website that we showed today for talking about adaptive cards. We've also got learn modules for within Microsoft Teams on building bots on adaptive cards, connectors, and task modules on everything. So I think, Dana, we could probably share that with the blog post too.
Yeah.
Right? Hopefully that answers your question with regards to what learning resources you have. And I would say the Team Step Doc, the adaptive cards website, the GitHub samples, and the learn modules would be if you're starting out and you're like, hey, what's the right way to approach this? Those 4 resources should be your go-to.
Great. All right. If there aren't any more questions, we can wrap up a couple minutes early. Otherwise, download the new calendar series, which I've posted in the IM chat a couple times. It will also be in the blog, and we'll send out reminders as well for that. And then the next call will be on July 21st at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for presenting. You guys did an awesome job.
Thank you. Bye.
Cool. Yeah, everyone. Thanks for sharing. Good seeing everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.